Hi, everybody. Aaron with you. Happy 2021. We're, 7 days in? And, that's all you can say sometimes. The current world right now is just, it's crazy. But honestly, we got to keep thinking positive because this is a new year. We're only 7 days in. So instead of thinking the negative, let's try to think of the positive. Let's think of the good things that are going to be happening and the good things that are going to be up and coming. Good things such as, that was a horrible segue, and I am so sorry that you had to hear that. Today on the podcast, we have with me Alexi Pappas. She's an Olympic athlete in long distance running. She's an actress and a filmmaker with the two films Tracktown and Olympic Dreams, and author of her upcoming book, Bravey, which comes out January 12th. It was really awesome to have her on. She talked very openly about her mental health struggles and the pain that suicide had caused her in her life, referring to her mother. So I can definitely tell you, I read the book. I got an advanced copy of it. And I referenced it several times in the podcast that I'm not really a big reader. But if it's pertaining to something that I'm near and dear to, such as mental health, I definitely connected with the book on a lot deeper level than I thought I would have. It was really nice to read a book and click with somebody in the sense of her going through something that maybe not completely linear to what she's doing, but something that resonated with me. And I was really happy that I got a chance to experience that through a different way that I'm really not entirely used to. But at the same time, it was a great read. Check out the show notes below if you want to pre-order the book. Again, it comes out January 12th. Otherwise, we take a nice deep dive into the book and talking about her life. And she was a wonderful guest to have on. And I was so happy that she took the time out to give us a nice preview of her book and her life. So without further ado, that is all I have for you. Enjoy this one. Let's roll. Fluid and awesome. So, all right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I have with me Alexi Pappas. She is an Olympic athlete, an actress, filmmaker, and author of the upcoming book, Bravey. So, Alexi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here and so grateful for you taking the time to read Bravey.
It's amazing because I actually, to be full disclosure, I just finished it today. And I had to go back to certain parts in the book because I got sent a copy because we knew you were coming on the podcast. And it's really interesting because you would think like, okay, what are you going to talk about? You talk about your Olympic journey. You talk about, how you met your husband, and you talk about all these little key areas, but then it all kind of comes together in this really unique way. And it's something that I'm not the biggest reader in the world, but I was hooked on it because you were talking just very normal. It wasn't so much of I did this and this and this, but you're just talking, saying, this is me.
Well, I really appreciate that. And maybe it has partly to do with when I read books, I also have I can have a challenged attention span. And so I chose to do this in like an essay format so that it had more of an emotional arc rather than just like a narrative arc. And I think that helped me as a writer. And I'm glad that it seemed to help you as a reader as well.
Just my wife can suggest books and books and books for me to read because she's one of the people that she wants to research stuff. I'm just someone that just wants to experience it. We'll figure it out down the road, whatever. Reading your book, it was just something that was gripping to me. One, because a lot of the challenges that you face, not necessarily on the athletic side, but the mental health side, really struck a chord with me. And wow. I think that's amazing because you say it in a very easy way for people to understand.
That's such a compliment because, I think it is one thing to experience something. And I know you can relate with your own experiences that it's one thing to experience something and it's a whole other thing to try to find the words to share an experience. And that was really the greatest pleasure and challenge of writing a book as compared to like going through some of the experiences in the book. And I'm just so glad that it translated and felt like digestible to you, you know?
And I think that's a really hard thing to do for people, especially if then this is your first book, correct?
Yes.
I'm assuming so. But it felt like just reading it was not even like I'm giving you all this advice, but it just felt very naturally like in a conversation setting. And that's something that's very appealing. And I can't tell you, there's certain points in the book that I'm sure I'll bring them up in a little bit here, but you say things that just like my therapist would say, and I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. I can't believe I didn't think of that. And then I read something you had wrote and I go, yeah, that's the same kind of thought I got. So it was just a really refreshing read for me, to say the least.
I'm so glad. And, you know, it's interesting how like vocabulary shifts or seeing things differently can really change our life. And I think that was something that saved my life, was like seeing a situation that I didn't understand, whether it was like a mental health journey or just growing up, because the book is a lot about just growing up and looking at it differently. And I think part of that is for like our own survival. We need to look at things that seem objective more subjectively. But it also just makes life a lot more curious and makes things feel more possible when we just shift the way we talk about them. And so I tried to do that in the book and just share some of those major shifts that I made, or epiphanies that I wished that I had learned earlier, but I did eventually learn, you know?
For a lot of my listeners that maybe have never heard of you or never know anything about you, do you want to just give them a very kind of brief overview of who you are and kind of how we got to this point together?
Yeah. So my name is Alexi. As you know, I'm an Olympian in long distance running, and I'm an actress and filmmaker. And this conversation came about because I wrote this book based on experiences I had with mental health. And it's not the only thing that the book is about, but I certainly think that's why we are connecting today. And I grew up without a mom. I lost my mom to suicide when I was 4, almost 5. And what that did to me really was, it was really, I had a challenging first few years, challenging thing. I saw a lot of bad pain basically, and then had a choice to make once my mom left, to feel, either like that feeling of being left was going to repeat my whole life. As I know some people, when bad things happen to them, I think that they look for other ways to, I don't know. I think it can define you. And I felt like a lot of my life was pushing up against that and not wanting to end up like my mom. But what we'll find in the book together is that I think when we try so hard to not end up like someone like that, we may actually end up like them. And so I had my own experience with post-Olympic depression after the Olympics. And that's where this book really comes full circle, where I come to understand what my mom experienced. And I needed to learn really how to navigate out of that so that I didn't end up like her. And it was really, really challenging because I don't think I was given the vocabulary as a child, and I don't think any of us are, to really understand that our brain is a body part and it can get injured just like any other, and it can also heal like any other. And so that shift was really a big lifesaver for me. And I think this book and this conversation came about from that experience.
Wow, what a perfect segue into what I actually was just going to say. I clipped a couple parts of the book, and the one thing that actually you said it perfectly going into it was, you said depression's an invisible disease, something you have, not something that you are. Looking for sneezes, but all I found were screams. And I think that was one of those moments where you look at it like, yeah, when you're a kid, you can't really describe depression to somebody as it's this mental illness that is just there, or it's just something that you are. And if we looked at that the same way that we looked at, a broken arm, or like you had said, a scratch, it's one of those things that the more that you talk about it, the more frequently it's going to be okay to talk about and to actually open up and be vulnerable, because that's what people really are looking for it, especially when it comes to mental health?
It comes back to giving ourselves like words and permission to feel like there's a different path forward than we might imagine, right? So oftentimes when we feel these symptoms that are maybe depression or other mental illness, the instinct is to feel like it will always be that way. And I think that makes us not want to share because we assume that our future is predetermined when it's really not. And I'm an Olympian. Like I've done great things, but I needed help and I didn't really understand that, or I didn't feel like I was deserved that when I needed it. And I think that is very, very telling, that if I didn't get the help right away and I needed my dad to make me get help, then what is everybody else feeling? And like, I think it is relatable. And it can also be fixed and changed like pretty seamlessly if we just decide to shift our mindset. And I think that was another reason for the book, was trying to just get people to understand that we can turn our mind around and think about something differently instantaneously, whether it's we're no longer a person who says sorry all the time, or whatever shift we want to make, we can make those shifts, you know?
We do a training actually for the center, and it's called resilience training. And what we talk about is basically shifting your perspective or shifting your focus. And we always use the example of, you can start your day. Let's say you spill your coffee. Let's say you do something and you look at the negative right in the beginning of the day. Everything else as you keep going is going to be negative. But okay, you spill your coffee, you let it go, but then you find the way that you can be grateful. I woke up, I got an extra 20 minutes of sleep. You get those positive messages, and then you get this upward spiral as opposed to the downward. And I think that shifting your perspective, kind of like what you're saying, is so huge, especially in overcoming those sorts of issues.
Yeah, well, with the coffee spilling example, I would even challenge those people who spilled their coffee to see it as something that's always in their favor. So like, I remember once falling down on a run, like on this rocky trail. And I think I had a choice that day to think that the world was like against me, that I was going to have that awful day, just like those people who spilled that coffee. But I tried to shift and rather feel like, oh, well, maybe I was meant to slow down that day, right? So like maybe I was meant to pause. So I think even not even ignoring the challenges, but deciding why those bumps in the road are actually always in your favor.
That's a cool way to look at it though too, because I kind of just look at it like, instead of focusing on it, but you're taking that negative instance and making it like, maybe this was just meant to happen, and then it just keeps going. And I think that's an awesome way to look at it. What drove you to write the book itself? Like, what was your main focus to be the advocate for, like, and I know that you're now an advocate for athletes as well, for mental health, correct?
Yeah. But I think that the reason why I wrote the book truly was just because I do think that there was like a younger me who saw accomplished people that I admired and wanted to be like, and I didn't understand how they got there, and I didn't know if that path would be for me, or if you could come from this certain experience and get to that point. And I had an awareness of how much it mattered to me that I had people to look up to, and I really latched on to any kind of mentorship that I could find, like I said it in the book, like a well-intentioned leech, where I didn't have a mom, but I looked up to every other successful or strong or admirable female, or men too, that I could find. And so in writing the book, I think it was an act of sharing just how circuitous the path can be to chasing your dreams, and knowing that I can only share so much on social media, and it's always going to be this fragmented view of a person. And a book is really a beautiful medium to tell a whole story. And so I think that's really what Bravey is it's the whole story. And And I tried to be as specific as possible, because as a filmmaker, we're always taught that the more specific we can be and the more truthful, the more accessible it's going to be, or the wider audience that it will reach. And so it's such a privilege to be on this podcast, because this wasn't necessarily the audience that I knew or thought that it could reach, but now I understand that it is, right?
The neat thing about that too is being vulnerable, especially with how you were in the book, and actually sharing, and I'll even say everything. I mean, things that I even think you weren't going to share. I read it. I'm like, yeah, people are going to resonate with this. And it wasn't just like when somebody reads something or they see something, you can tell if it's fake. You can tell if it's not, they didn't put the 100% effort into it. Yeah. This one you did. And I cannot wait to tell people, hey, check this book out, because it is something that is going to be life-changing for somebody. It will be.
I hope so. I truly hope so, because man, yeah, it's not enough anymore, I think, to just give like the platitude or the thing at the end of the story. I think those are really useful, and there's a time and a space for it on like an inspirational poster, but it makes a difference when you hear something from the right person. And I recognize that I'm in a role now where I've experienced like the very highest highs. Like, I've been to the Olympics and to the best film festivals in the world, but I've also experienced the lowest lows. And so I think I have a privilege and a responsibility to reach everybody that might feel anywhere along that spectrum of like chasing a huge dream or having really, difficult thoughts.
But what's really amazing about that is that you do share both of those sides. It's not just specifically biased to one side. You share both sides.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that is true. And I wouldn't have wished that for myself. And what's funny is, I mean, I don't know, it's funny, but when I was putting together the book proposal for this book, I hadn't yet even had the courage to admit that I was having a mental illness myself, because I was in the middle of it when we were writing the proposal, and I couldn't really accept it, and I wasn't fully healed, and I wasn't fully open about it. And so when we wrote the proposal, this wasn't even a part of the book in the first place. So to your question again about like, did you want to write this to, address this specific issue or audience? The truth is, no, I wasn't even ready to talk about it. And I wrote about it for the first time in this book and shared with my editors. And so they learned about it through the chapter itself. And that was how I had to do it, because I wasn't comfortable yet. I wasn't mature enough, or I wasn't, maybe some of the readers will be, more wise than I was when I was going through it, but I certainly just wasn't ready until I wrote the chapter.
Are you talking about the depression chapter?
Yeah.
That was that chapter, when I read it, was the most engaging to me, because I clicked on it with almost every level. I did. I felt like exactly what you were talking about, because I've been not obviously completely linear with your story, but we shared experiences together, even though I've never met you beyond this. And that's what's powerful. I mean, I actually clipped something from that too. And it said, it was the hardest thing I ever did. I don't have regrets. I have tools. Yeah. And I think how you came about to recognize that and admit, yes, there was a problem, or there is an issue that I'm facing, and I can't face it alone. And I know that you talk about your father being a person to say, like, you need to get this, you need to get some help. That's very powerful when you have somebody to say, look, this is a problem. I see it. Maybe you don't. My wife did the same thing to me. And so that's why I felt like I was clicking on it at such a good level. I mean, that's just one of a 1,000 different things I took away from that chapter. But I feel like that one was the most powerful one in the entire book.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I'm glad that you and I both had people like your wife and like my dad to help us make us get help. But what about, I think part of who this book is for is all the people who don't have those people in their life. Because it was really, my dad only knew that I might have needed help because he saw my mom take her own life. And maybe your wife is like wise and knows like the signs. But what about people who are, don't have history of mental illness in their family, or just don't have anybody to help them feel okay with getting help? And I think that was another reason why that chapter was so important to me once I wrote it, is because I do think that I was lucky, but it shouldn't just be luck that somebody gets to save their own life.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it's amazing too, because when you, it's funny because you keep saying something and I keep coming back to something you say in the book, and it's something I clip every time, which is kind of weird. But you say, like, the people that might not have that person, or they don't know how to approach it. You talk about, and I'm not giving away too much about it, but you talk about a letter that your grandma wrote to your mom.
Yeah.
That in itself was, saying that she thought she might have been helping, but she saw depression as a choice as opposed to, I'm like, yes, people maybe think that way, but it's something to maybe open your horizons a bit more and look that this is just something that is there and something that we can help with, even if we don't understand it.
Yeah. I mean, to think that it's a choice would be like thinking that somebody who tears their hamstring did it by choice. We're like, okay, there might have been like life decisions made that made you more likely to tear your hamstring, which, I think in retrospect, if we have some sort of depression, I mean, mine was situational, meaning a series of things happened or changed in my life, and then it felt like falling off a cliff, whereas some people I think are in a different trajectory towards those feelings. But I can certainly point to turns that I made, or pauses that I should have made along the way, but it's not a choice, right? And that's exactly what you're saying. And it was really challenging to realize that my mom, because I kind of grew up before I experienced it thinking that she made a choice to leave me, and she did, but she didn't, and she really didn't get the kind of care that I got, and that makes me both really sad and also really hopeful that no one else has to go through that. They don't have to.
I get what you're entirely saying with, especially maybe back then was medical care for mental health not obviously as advanced as it is today. Did we not know as much? Was there a big stigma to it? Of course. I mean, you could say yes to all of those. Now, having the resources, having a podcast, having every available website on the internet, having text-based services. I mean, there is a normalcy to maybe talking about it, but there still is that stigma. And it's one of those things where the more that we can address it, the more that we can say it's okay to have it and to normalize it, the more lives that people are going to, I guess, for the lack of a better term, you'll save. And
Yeah.
I think your book is one of them. Plain and simple. I really do. And I hate saying that because I mean, it sounds like, oh, your book's great. You're this, but it is. And again, this is coming from somebody that never reads books. So I shouldn't say never reads books.
That's great. I understand, and I really appreciate it. I think the one thing that I'm still a little bit trying to figure out is why, when I needed help, was it so hard to get help? And I'm not even sure how frustrated it seemed in the book, but it took asking for favors to get those appointments. And I'm an Olympian. I have a lot of great access, great friends, great resources. And it was still this labyrinthian process to get help, even when I wanted it and needed it, or accepted that I needed it. And so I think for those of people who are listening, maybe that's something that still, maybe the people listening accept that mental illness is real. I have to believe that if someone's listening to this podcast, they're in the more accepting category, perhaps, right? Yeah. So let's say someone is really accepting, it's real, but what do you do about it? I think, yes, you think about mental illness like a body part, but if it is like a body part, if it is like a scratch on your brain, when we fall down and break our leg, it's not hopefully impossible to get an appointment with a doctor or physio. Like I know I could get 5 physio references, but I can't get an appointment with mental health support. And so I think that is really like the next question, if we want to look ahead really at like what now needs to be done. It's not just getting people to ask for help, it's finding out how do they even get it.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. Just for the simple sake of that, on every podcast, I always reference at the end of it during the outro that we created a text-based emotional support service called the Hopeline. And that's super important for an immediate need. If somebody needs someone to talk to, we provide that for people. It's free, you know, and it's one of those things that is immediate. But you're right. To get a therapist, to get it, you have to go through insurance. You have to go through all of these extra things that it's not an immediate help. And for most times when people are in crisis, they want that help immediately.
Or they want it in person.
Yeah.
And I think that's perfectly reasonable to think that there's so many nuances to talking to someone in person that I don't know, there's a different comfort level. So I guess there's other times when you prefer to talk to someone on the phone, I suppose, or have that distance. But yeah, I think that's like the next frontier. But the first frontier, I think, is to not only accept and destigmatize, but understand how to see mental illness so that it feels like a solvable injury rather than an impossible, invisible cloud.
For you, what was that therapy, or what was it? Was it a combination of other things, or was it just that?
That shifted the mindset.
Yeah.
So I think that my epiphany happened in one particular appointment, which was one of my first, I think it was like my first appointment with my doctor in Oregon, Dr. Arpaia. And I was at the point where I was okay being really, really honest with him about my symptoms or what I was feeling and thinking. And that was partly because I didn't know him. And I was like, whatever, who cares what this guy thinks of me? And it can't get any worse. So I'll just tell him everything. And then he told me quite simply that I was sick and that I had like a scratch on my brain. And I'm an athlete. And so scratches are something that I've grown up being very familiar with, like falling down when you're rollerblading. Like I just like, I get it. So I think he was able to communicate with me in a language I understood. And I think most people now could be communicated to in a way that compares mental illness to a scratch, on your knee. Same, it's like a scratch on your brain. And I think that would make sense to people for the most part, but it certainly made sense to me. And so that was like literally a switch flip for me, where I went from feeling feelings to imagining myself as an injured person, which once you can accept that you're injured, you can accept that you're injured and you can believe that you might heal. And that's the number one thing I think that suicidal people in particular, people with suicidal thoughts feel is they feel that they will never feel any different and they feel that they must die. And that was like what I felt. But once I could buy into this image of like my brain is scratched, then I started to believe that it might be possible that I would feel differently one day. And that was like a big life changer. And my doctor encouraged me to focus on my actions instead of my feelings. And that was like the next step, was like, now what actions can I take that will eventually affect my thoughts and that will eventually affect my feelings?
It takes work. It takes work, plain and simple. It's not just you go in. Yeah, one, you have to feel comfortable with somebody that's giving you this advice, but they're not just saying, okay, it's going to feel better, it's going to do this. No, they're giving you life lessons and tools for your tool belt to make you better. And it's you that have to put in that work.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, again, like back to the injury thing, like nobody would tell you that your broken leg is going to heal overnight. You would never expect that. But there are things you can do to help encourage its healing. You can sleep, you can drink bone broth, you can do any number of things to heal a physical injury. You could do exercises for certain injuries. And it's the same with the mental health healing. And I think the best gift that your doctor can give you are those tools so that you can focus on those actions rather than wake up every day offended by your feelings, which are not going to feel better overnight. And I think accepting that is just so refreshing, because then you wake up and like, yes, you're sad because it's going to take more than a day, but you're not like surprised that you're sad. You're like,
Yeah.
actually, I knew I was going to be sad, or whatever feelings you're feeling, but I am doing the actions. And eventually that is going to boil into a beautiful soup of not the same feeling anymore.
Yeah.
And, I'm big on like imagining and visualizing. And so I did try to imagine myself as a kind of soup that I was making.
Yeah. No, I think that's the thing. If you don't put it into a term like that or something very simple, it might not resonate with people, but you say it very simply. And that's exactly what people need. They need just that example, plain and simple. And I kind of referenced it earlier. And so I guess maybe you did answer this, but I'm kind of wanted to come back because I just wanted a little clarification. So you're still currently, you're obviously training, I'm assuming?
Yeah. I mean, COVID has like changed a lot of things for professional athletes.
Yeah.
But, I am, there's an Olympics this summer. There haven't really been races. So I'm a long distance runner and I'm a marathoner now. So the races are like, you have to shut down a whole city and people have to be in the streets. And so there aren't really races. But if there are races, then I might be able to qualify for the Olympics. And I'll always be a runner, and so I'm still running. It just looks a little bit differently right now because we're in a pandemic, and I understand that. So I think I respect those barriers.
Right. And it's good to hear though that, things are going to start opening up soon, and eventually, it's going to get back to normal, and it's going to be kind of a weird transition to it. But at the same time, with, you're still training in the meantime and you're still getting there. Have you, like, during COVID, have you really focused on something as far as like, is it training? Is it getting mental health? Is it getting like, what's been kind of your thing during COVID?
That's a great question. So I focused on finishing this book at the beginning of COVID. That was a lot of work, but it was a great thing to put my energy into. And I focused on my weaknesses athletically. And that meant, both mental and physical. I work with a team at this company called the Human Nutrition Project. And that's like nutritionist and kind of sports psychology for me. And that's been really helpful to just like, keep like refining things that you might not feel like you have time for when you're in a competition season. And then physically working on weaknesses I have like a trainer, Monica and Dag, that it's like Team Dag. And I just like have been working on muscles that I've never felt before. So
yeah,
like I can flex the muscles around my spine now, and I could never do that before, which is like a lot for your postural control.
Sure.
And so I'm working on things that are undoubtedly going to make me a better athlete, but things that I'd never paused to take note of when I was running 120 miles in a week,
Right. And how many people, especially during this time, have like focused on things they never thought they would? Because this whole pandemic has really changed a lot of people internally and externally. But
yeah.
So let's talk about the book one more time. Let's talk about how else we can get in contact with you. So Bravey is coming out when?
Bravey comes out. So Bravey has a foreword by Maya Rudolph that I wanted to mention. Bravey has a foreword by Maya Rudolph that I wanted to mention because while you may not know who I am, you might know who she is. And it comes out January 12th, so really soon. And people can find it on they can find the book anywhere that they buy books. Their local bookstore, Amazon, wherever you like to support and get your books. And I encourage people to pre-order it because there's a special champion gift that's custom made for this book that is coming with all the pre-orders.
There you go. See, and like I said, we'll make sure we link all of that. And also, you have a couple movies out as well. So, do you want to talk about those?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I have a few movies. So I made a movie called Tracktown, and that is available, I think, at least on iTunes, if not other places. And then my most recent movie is called Olympic Dreams, and we made that with Nick Kroll at the Winter Olympics. So the last Olympics that happened, and it's out on Showtime and iTunes and various other places. So check out Olympic Dreams. And we have other exciting projects in the works, but I think the next big thing is Bravey book.
No, that's awesome. And like I said, I will make sure we link all of that stuff in the show notes below. Obviously, like I said, I recommend the book entirely from a person that does not read books. I absolutely suggest this for anybody that wants to learn and honestly read a very intriguing and powerful story.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful.
Absolutely.
And, thank you for your belief in me.
Oh, of course. Believe me, it's worth it. It's such a good book. So again, no, thank you so much, Alexi. I do appreciate it.
Thank you so much again, Alexi, for coming on the podcast. Again, check out her show notes below for all of her social media, her website, where you can pre-order the book. And I also put a couple of Amazon links with her movies as well that I could find on there. So again, check it out. AlexiPappas.com. Book Bravey comes out January 12th. You know, just for the complete side note, I also do realize that I forgot to ask her the question that I ask every single guest. I don't know why that just didn't come into my head towards the end of it, but you know what? It's kind of cool because she answers it perfectly in the book. I mean, it's literally the answer. Everything that she talked about, everything that she even said on the podcast, it's exactly applicable to the question I always ask. To what's your advice to anybody that's ever been in your situation or resonated with something you've said? I think it's pretty clear that the book does that. So I was very happy that I still got an answer, even though I didn't get an answer from her. So again, Alexi, thank you so much. So if you like the podcast today, like it, share, subscribe, follow, whatever platform you listen on. We're on Podbean, iTunes, Podcast Addict, Spreaker. I mean, we're on everything. You know, the podcast is growing. It's actually growing at a rate that I never thought it would, but I'm really happy that it is because I get a more broad audience to share the message of somebody's story. Unfortunately, you got to listen to me, but that's okay. Maybe not. I don't know, but get the podcast out there more, the more awesome, interesting guests I can get on. So again, like, share, subscribe, follow, whatever platform you're on. Visit the center on the social pages. You can visit us on our website, www.centerforsuicideawareness.org, or check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, Discord. All are at Center for Suicide Awareness in Kaukauna, Wisconsin. It's usually how we get a lot of the information out, and usually we'll try to give sneak preview of podcasts. Otherwise, we do post some pretty awesome stuff, and it's the most up-to-date information that we have to get out to you. So check it out. The Center for Suicide Awareness is happy to be partnered with the Mental Health News Radio Network. It's a collection of different mental health-based podcasts, but it's not always just mental health-based. It could be a bunch of other things. It could be social issues. It could be suicide. It could be mental health. It could be first responders. It could be anything. They pretty much have a podcast for anything, any topic that you're really looking for. And we're happy to be partnered with them because they definitely provide us with some awesome guests, and they are very, very upfront and honest about who they are and what their purpose and message is. So check them out. mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com. You have any questions? Do you have comments? Do you have concerns? If you do, and it's about me or the podcast or a guest, or if you really want to get in touch with somebody and you don't know how, you can email me, Aaron, AARON, at centerforsuicideawareness.org. I am a real person. I respond to emails. I am currently sitting in my makeshift office right now as I'm recording this because I am waiting for a desk to come into my new office. So I am a real person. I actually will respond to you. Again, Aaron, AARON, at centerforsuicideawareness.org. The Center for Suicide Awareness has a text-based emotional support service called the Hopeline. All you would have to do is take out your cell phone or any device that you can use to send text messages to Hopeline to 741-741, and you'll be connected to one of our trained specialists free of charge to talk about any issue that you are facing. And like I referenced earlier in the podcast, I mean, 2021 has started off with a lot of anxiety, a lot of unknowns, and a lot of uncertainties, financial issues, marital problems, relationship issues, depression. That's why we provided this, because we know that having a platform like text messaging is easier to talk to somebody and maybe talk about some of those hard topics. It makes it a little bit easier. It makes it a little bit more comfortable than talking to somebody in person. It's an immediate help if you need it. So again, you can always text Hopeline to 741-741. It's kind of amazing that we've already come into 2021. I mean, even though there was a lot of weird stuff that happened in 2020, 2021, got to look ahead. We got to look at the horizon. Like I said before, we are in a lot of unknowns, but as long as we do it together and we just be the best human beings we can be, we're going to get through anything. And I firmly believe that from a person that has seen the worst of the worst. I genuinely believe that there is a vast majority of good people that want the best for everybody else. So let's keep spreading that positivity and let's keep being that light, because that's what we need to do. That's what makes us the best people that we can be. So like I say every single week, and let these words resonate and be there all the time. Be kind. Be kind to one another. You are loved and you are important. And remember, you are not alone. Take care, everybody. Bye.